In the vast silence of the Egyptian desert, where sand buries kingdoms and time swallows memory, one name still cuts through the dust like a whisper carved in stone. Nefertiti. A queen of impossible beauty, impossible power, and an impossible mystery. A woman whose face has become one of history's most iconic images, yet whose fate has remained hidden for more than 3,000 years. Her story begins not with her birth, which remains unknown, but with her arrival into the royal palace of Thebes. She entered not as a mere consort, but as a force of nature. The inscriptions speak of her grace, her strength, her presence. She stood beside Pharaoh Akhenaten not as a decoration, but as an equal. She was shown crushing Egypt's enemies, offering sacrifices to the gods, wearing crowns reserved only for kings. Even in the ancient carvings, her gaze is unbreakable, confident, commanding, alive. But her rise to power was only the beginning. Under Akhenaten's rule, Egypt shifted its heartbeat. The old gods, worshipped for thousands of years, were abandoned. In their place rose a single deity, the Aten, the visible sun. The temples were emptied, the priests stripped of power, and the royal couple became the living intermediaries of this new cosmic order. And Nefertiti, she was not just present. She was central. Her image stood beside the kings in every shrine, every relief, every prayer. Together they built a new capital, Akhetaten, a city carved from the desert cliffs and flooded with sunlight. A city made to honor their god, their vision, their shared rule. But behind the beauty of this sacred place, tensions brewed. The priesthood of Ammonius burned with rage. The nobility whispered of blasphemy. The common people grumbled in confusion. Yet through it all, the queen remained calm, her posture steady, her crown tall, her hand always resting gently on her husband's arm. And then, after more than a decade of dominance, her story cracks. The records change. Statues once celebrating her are suddenly abandoned. Inscriptions end abruptly. Her name, once sung across the empire, begins to vanish like smoke. One year it appears everywhere. The next, nothing. No funeral. No tomb. No mention of illness or exile. Just silence. For most queens this would be expected. But Nefertiti was not most queens. Her presence had been nearly equal to the pharaohs. Her influence radiated across Egypt. Her face, her deeds, her titles, too great to simply disappear. Yet she did. Some scholars believe she died suddenly, the victim of plague or childbirth. But if that were true, her death would have been recorded. A royal burial would have been prepared. Mourning rituals performed. Egypt did not simply misplace queens of her stature. Others whisper that she fell from grace, that she disagreed with her husband's increasingly radical beliefs, that she attempted to restore the old gods and paid the price. But there is no evidence of a fall, no erasure of her image, no damnatio memoriae. What emerges instead is something far stranger. Right at the moment Nefertiti vanishes from history, another figure appears. A ruler with an unfamiliar name, Smenkhare. A pharaoh who rises out of thin air. A pharaoh who rules for only a short time. A pharaoh who seems to mirror her status, her position, her authority. And then he too disappears, just as suddenly. Some believe Smenkhare was a younger brother of Akhenaten. Others claim he was a son. But there are those, respected Egyptologists, who argue something far more extraordinary. That Smenkhare was Nefertiti herself. A queen who vanished, only to return as a king. A transformation so radical it could only occur in a kingdom already boiling from revolution. A change so drastic it would require secrecy, political precision, and spiritual justification. And in the sun-drenched city of Akhetaten, anything was possible. But what could force a queen, one of the most powerful in Egypt, to abandon her name, her image, her identity, and take on the throne as a man? Why did she disappear from inscriptions only to reappear in a new form? And why, after all of this, were both Nefertiti and Smenkhare wiped from the records entirely? The truth lies somewhere in the ruins of Akhetaten. In the broken statues, the scratched-out names, the fragments of letters, the silent burial chambers. In a story too dangerous for ancient Egypt to preserve. For now only one thing is certain. Nefertiti did not simply vanish. Someone made her vanish. And the reason for her disappearance was powerful enough to shake a kingdom, erase a dynasty, and plunge history into darkness for more than 3,000 years. Her face remains. Her story does not. And that silence speaks louder than any inscription. When Nefertiti vanished from the inscriptions, the city of Akhetaten felt it long before anyone admitted it. The sunlight that once poured through the open temples seemed colder. The hymns to the Aten grew quieter. And within the marble halls of the royal palace, shadows lengthened in ways the architects had never intended. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who had built a new world out of the desert, began to change. His once graceful figure, carved endlessly in the walls of the city, seemed to lose weight. His face grew gaunt. His speeches shorter. He walked the courtyards like a man haunted, as if something vital had been ripped from him. Without Nefertiti at his side, the king looked incomplete. His vision dimmed, his resolve weakened, and even the sun god he worshipped seemed less radiant. And the court felt it. Whispers spread like cracks in stone. Some said the queen was dead. Others insisted she had been exiled. A few claimed she was hiding in the palace, living in a private chamber, issuing orders from behind a curtain. But the truth was always out of reach, slipping between the fingers of anyone who tried to grasp it. Then, as if summoned by the silence itself, a new figure emerged. Smenkhare. A name no one had seen before. A king no one had heard of. A ruler who suddenly appeared beside Akhenaten as co-pharaoh, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt with the confidence of someone born to the throne. His reliefs bear royal regalia, his cartouche asserts legitimacy, and his presence demands recognition. But the scholars of today see something strange. The images of Smenkhare look eerily familiar. The elongated face, the slender neck, the delicate chin, and, more importantly, the style of the crown, identical to the one Nefertiti once wore. Some believe the resemblance means nothing, that the Amarna art style simply portrayed everyone in the same exaggerated form. But others argue the similarity is too precise, too intentional, almost as if the sculptors were depicting the same person, under a new identity. But why would Nefertiti need a new identity? The answer may lie in Akhenaten's failing rule. As the years passed, Egypt began to fracture. Provinces rebelled. Foreign enemies grew bold. The priests of Ammonius sharpened their knives in the shadows. And Akhenaten, distracted by faith and weakened by grief, seemed unable to hold the kingdom together. Someone had to step in. Someone strong. Someone respected. Someone the people trusted. But a woman could not rule Egypt alone, not openly, not as pharaoh, not in a time of crisis. Unless she became a man in name. Unless she took the throne under a title no one could challenge. Unless she allowed history to remember her not as a queen, but as a king. If Nefertiti became Smenkhare, it would explain everything. Her sudden disappearance. The immediate arrival of a new king. The identical artistic features. The abrupt shift in power. And the impossibly short reign, 2, maybe 3 years at most. Because just as quickly as Smenkhare appears, he too vanishes. No tomb. No mummy. No records beyond a handful of carvings. 2 disappearances. One at the moment the other appears. Both erased within a few years. There is more. Years after Akhenaten's death, when the old religion was restored and the city of Akhetaten abandoned, a pharaoh named Tutankhaten took the throne. A child king. And beside him stood a powerful woman. A woman who advises him, guides him, protects him. Her name was Ankhesenamen, Nefertiti's daughter. Some believe that hidden behind the throne, hidden behind the boy king, hidden behind the restored gods and old priests, stood the same ghostly figure who had vanished. A queen who may have ruled in secret. A pharaoh who may have worn 2 names. A woman whose power refused to die, no matter how many times history tried to silence her. But the greatest mystery of all lay beneath the sand, untouched for thousands of years. Nefertiti's mummy was missing. Her tomb was missing. Her name, either erased or oddly preserved. Egyptian royalty did not simply disappear. Not without reason. Not without intent. If her body could be found, the truth might finally reveal itself. And so, centuries later, archaeologists began searching the desert for answers. They found tombs, treasures, skeletons, fragments. They found the secrets of kings, queens, and forgotten children. But Nefertiti remained elusive, until one day, a discovery was made. A body, badly damaged, hidden in a tomb long thought to belong to someone else. A body that carried signs of royal blood. A body matching her age. A body that stirred a theory no one was prepared for. A theory that could rewrite Egyptian history. But the answer, if it is the answer, remains incomplete, unconfirmed, debated. A truth half buried, half revealed, like the dust covering the ancient stones. Nefertiti's disappearance was no accident. Her absence was not simple. Her silence was crafted, either by her, or by those who feared her. Whatever happened, her story was not over when her name vanished from the walls. It was only beginning. And the sands of Egypt were not done speaking. The modern world has brought machines, satellites, scanners, and science to the land of the pharaohs. But Egypt still guards its secrets like a jealous god. And among all its mysteries, none is more guarded, more controversial, or more fiercely debated than the fate of Nefertiti. Her disappearance carved a scar into history, but her absence carved something deeper. It created a void, a space that begged for answers, a silence that archaeologists could not ignore. It was deep in the Valley of the Kings, in a tomb known as KV35, where a discovery dragged that silence into the light. Inside lay 3 bodies, each damaged, each ancient, each a riddle in human form. One was a young man, another a boy, and the third a woman. A woman whose body was folded awkwardly, whose bandages were ripped away in antiquity, whose face had been smashed beyond recognition. For decades she was called simply the younger lady. Her skull broken, her chest cavity shattered, her burial undignified, rushed, unworthy of royalty. And yet, DNA told a different story. She belonged to the royal bloodline. She shared genetic markers with pharaohs. She had lived in the Amarna period, the time of Akhenaten, the time of Nefertiti. The world stood still. Some scientists argued she was Akhenaten's sister. Others believed she was the mother of Tutankhamun. And then, faint and controversial, came a whisper, a suggestion that chilled every Egyptologist who heard it. What if the body was Nefertiti? But the face was damaged, the inscriptions absent, the evidence incomplete. The debate raged like a desert storm. Scholars fought. Museums clashed. Theories were born and buried. And somewhere beneath the noise, the truth continued to hide in the shadows of time. Because another discovery was about to deepen the darkness. In 2015, a British archaeologist announced that the tomb of Tutankhamun, the most famous tomb in the world, might contain hidden chambers, unopened halls, sealed rooms behind the painted walls, rooms untouched since the 18th dynasty, rooms that, according to his scans, could contain a burial of royal scale, a burial large enough, magnificent enough, significant enough, to belong to a woman of extraordinary importance. The world held its breath. If Nefertiti had disappeared, if her funeral was erased, if her memory was hidden, then placing her burial inside the tomb of her son, behind secret walls, would make sense. Would protect her, conceal her, honor her in silence. The theory ignited global frenzy. For a moment, humanity felt closer than ever to the queen who had escaped history. But Egypt, as always, closed its fist around the truth. Further scans contradicted the first. Officials denied permission to excavate. The debate fell into the same endless loop of speculation and doubt. And Nefertiti remained where she had always been, missing. Her name scratched off walls. Her images defaced. Her titles reassigned. Her city abandoned. Her body nowhere to be found. Yet in the ruins of Akhetaten, in the collapsed palaces and broken temples, a feeling persists. The ghost of a presence. The sense that she walked these stones long after the inscriptions stopped telling her story. Maybe she became Smenkhare. Maybe she ruled as king. Maybe she died in childbirth. Maybe she was murdered by the priesthood. Maybe she survived longer than anyone imagined, living in the shadows as the kingdom she helped build crumbled around her. Or perhaps the greatest mystery of all is this. What if Nefertiti chose to erase herself? What if she understood that her image was too powerful, too symbolic, too dangerous in a world turning violently back to the old gods? What if she stepped out of history intentionally, slipping into anonymity to protect her children, her legacy, her kingdom? What if her disappearance was not a tragedy, but a strategy? In Egypt, erasure is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a shield, a way to hide what cannot be destroyed, a way to protect what others would defile, a way to preserve secrets that power cannot allow to surface. 3,000 years later, her story remains untold, not because it is forgotten, but because it was never meant to be known. The queen who ruled beside the sun god may have stepped into darkness by choice. And perhaps that is why her face survives. Why her bust, found in a sculptor's workshop, remains one of the most iconic objects on earth. Why her eyes still captivate, still hypnotize, still command reverence. The world remembers her beauty. But beauty was the least of her weapons. She maneuvered kingdoms. She reshaped religion. She controlled a pharaoh. She may have ruled a nation twice, once as queen and once as king. And then she vanished. In the silent deserts of Egypt, where the wind has erased armies and obliterated empires, one woman's absence still echoes louder than the footsteps of all those who came after her. Nefertiti is not missing. She is waiting. Waiting in the sand. Waiting in the broken inscriptions. Waiting in the DNA of unnamed mummies. Waiting behind painted walls that no living hand has touched in over 30 centuries. Her story is a riddle without end. A queen without a tomb. A legacy without a conclusion. Perhaps one day we will find her. Perhaps one day her secrets will rise again with the sun. But until then, Nefertiti remains what she became the moment her name vanished from stone, the greatest unsolved mystery in the history of queens.